The title of my research project is Demographic Items and the Dual Process Motivation Model as Predictors of Explicit and Implicit Transgender Prejudice. My name is Grace MacKinley and I'll be working alongside my research supervisor, Joel Anderson. My thesis question will cover two predictors of transgender prejudice, demographic items, and the dual process motivation model. I intend to include a number of demographics within my study, such as gender, age, religion, geographical location, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education level, political orientation, and whether participants have had any previous contact with transgender people. Studies on demographics as predictors of trans prejudice have been conducted in Canada, the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, and the United States. I initially thought age would be a significant predictor of prejudice. However, surprisingly, after a review of the literature, I found that not to be the case. Based on the limited number of studies, men have been found to be more significantly correlated to trans prejudice, those influenced by religion, and individuals who have not previously had any contact with transgender people. Therefore, I hypothesise that gender, religion, and contact will be related to an increase in both explicit and implicit trans prejudice. The theoretical and empirical evidence behind the dual process motivation model as a predictor of transgender prejudice was even more scarce. I found there to be a larger amount of research on right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation as separate variables rather than combined into the dual pathway as a predictor. This separation is due to right-wing authoritarianism being thought of as a standalone predictor of prejudice before a recent shift to newer evidence that has suggested these two distinct dimensions form a stronger predictor of prejudice when combined. Currently, there is a greater agreement on right-wing authoritarianism as a predictor of trans prejudice, as a smaller number of studies on social dominance orientation has mixed results. The dual pathway is a significant predictor of prejudice and homophobia, and I expect this to also be the case for transgender prejudice. I hypothesise that the dual process motivation model will be a stronger predictor of transgender prejudice than demographics, and both right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation to be correlated and each uniquely predict implicit and explicit transgender prejudice. My study design will include a number of measures: demographic items, the most recent form of the right-wing authoritarianism scale, and the new social dominance orientation scale, or the SDO7. Within my group of 4 Monash students, we will create an implicit measure of transgender prejudice, and the explicit measure will be a pre-existing scale, such as Billard's 2018 Attitudes Towards Transgender Men and Women scale. As a group, we will need to discuss this further and come to a decision together. So to recruit local data and combine these measures, the recruitment method Prolific will be used. Following a brief discussion with my research supervisor, participants are likely to receive a $5 completion, and these funds will be provided by Monash University. Utilising this recruitment method and paying subjects a larger amount for their time will hopefully motivate them to answer thoughtfully and apply a greater degree of effort. As this is a modular project, 4 people will be recruiting participants, and this will ensure a larger sample size to be used for each individual research project. Any individuals able to give consent and are over 18 years of age will be included as research participants, hopefully allowing us to gather a larger sample. Constructing the implicit measure of trans prejudice will be the most time-consuming area of the research project. Creating a 4-block go, no-go association task with 3 other students and electing an explicit measure of prejudice will be the most complex to organise and require the most time. However, once this has been completed, electronically recruiting participants and analysing results will hopefully be relatively straightforward. It's very exciting to be adding to a research topic that has only just started gaining momentum. There are currently very limited studies on transgender prejudice, particularly within an Australian context, and I'm extremely interested to see whether findings from existing studies will translate to our Australian sample. Interestingly, most of the studies I found on transgender prejudice base their findings on very young research participants recruited from universities. So it will be interesting to see whether these results can be generalised towards a wider population. There are currently no studies predicting implicit transgender prejudice, making this topic, measures and potential findings a foundation for future research and an exciting introduction to a new avenue within this growing field. In addition, including an implicit measure will address the reoccurring limitation of possible social desirability bias from existing studies. An implicit measure will provide a more accurate representation of prejudice and reduce the possibility of participants providing what they see as politically correct or socially acceptable responses, rather than what they truly think and feel about this socially sensitive issue. Thank you very much.